Hey there. Before we dive into today's episode, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you're helping us spread the word and connect with more amazing people like you. Plus, you'll never miss out on any of our future episodes. Thanks for your support.
Welcome to We Be Parents, where parent doctors Matthew Lederman and Alona Pulde explore current parenting topics, share stories, and help bring families closer together.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of We Be Parents. I'm Dr. Alona Pulde.
And I'm Dr. Matthew Lederman. Glad to be here.
Yes, indeed. And we're going to get started. We're going to jump into headlines and heartlines.
Headlines and Heartlines.
This is where we play with ideas, answer your burning questions, tackle some current events, and find the balance between taking things seriously and keeping a sense of humor. So today, for Headlines and Heartlines, I wanted to share that notion of parent burnout with two stories that I came across and really touched my own heart because, boy, could I relate to them. The first was a mother who shared on a parenting blog about how severe sleep deprivation led her to make a series of mistakes, one after the other. She packed her toddler's lunchbox with cat food instead of snacks. She forgot to put on shoes before leaving her house. And then she even drove halfway to work before realizing she'd left her child at home with her partner. The series of events she described just left her feeling frazzled and guilty and incompetent as a mom. Again, something I never packed cat food instead of snacks, but much of those feelings I can totally relate to. And another one about a mother who shared how hard it was trying to do it all, working full time, managing household chores, being there for her kids. She described how the pressure to be a super mom led to total burnout, which culminated in a breakdown where she found herself crying in her pantry after a particularly tough day. And it really touched my heart because I have been there, not crying in my pantry, but certainly feeling like I want to do it all and I just can't.
Yeah, and I think for the dads listening, we might not go to the crying, but we go to the anger or the irritability. And I think when we get overwhelmed or pulled in a million directions or just struggling to keep it together, we get really irritable. And I'm not saying dads don't go to the crying place or moms don't go to the anger place. I'm just saying to add that in that people that might not relate to the crying piece, which I have not broken down crying, but I've definitely felt that hopeless, overwhelm, burnout. And if anything, my reaction is to go more shut down, irritable, anger. And it's just something that I think all parents can relate to, even if it's not the exact story.
Right. Because I think so many of us are living in that state of survival mode, regularly just going from thing to thing to thing to thing. And it can't but not burn you out at some point. But we have this expectation that we should be able to do it all, that we should be able to juggle all these balls, that we should be able to multitask and do 5 things at once.
And there's a big cost to it.
Yeah.
My body, I know when I'm trying to keep a lot of things together, I get more intense because I'm trying to focus. My head tends to wander, and if I'm not almost hypervigilant, I'm going to forget something. I definitely have given the wrong kids the wrong lunches. I'm just happy they got lunch sometimes, and they're obviously not as happy about that. That bar is a little low for them. But I've lost children at Target, and that's a whole other story. Did I not tell you that? You're looking like this.
Oh, no, I'm just remembering it. And it's still.
Well, I knew I wasn't ever able to go home again until I had my child. So that was, but that was, talk about just overwhelm where I just can't do it almost. And to me, losing the child was like the
Matt,
biggest
you
one.
know you're going to just have to tell that story now. It's piqued everybody's interest, I'm sure.
Oh my God. But losing, I will tell it, but losing the child where I remember at one point I was just like, I'm not fit to be a parent. I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like those moments where you're just like, holy cow, this is not supposed to happen to me. I see this in the movies. But what happened was Kylie decided, I mean, she was very little, 3 maybe, I would say. And all of a sudden I turn around and I'm like, oh no, where's Kylie? And I'm yelling her name.
In the middle of Target.
Middle of Target. I'm yelling her name, and then I go right into Jack Bauer mode. I'm like, make a perimeter, everybody seal off the exits. I'm telling different parents. I don't even know who these people are. I'm like, I need you to go to women's bathing suits. I need you. I'm just like, shut down. I call in the security guard over. But then as we mobilized, and I'm like, wait a second. I know I saw her like not that long ago. Like how far could she have gotten? She's only 3. And then I was like, oh, maybe and I'm looking around and she's sitting, hiding under this thing of dresses. So just totally hidden under there with such a big smile on her face. But she heard me calling her and she decided to play hide and seek at that moment. And I was just so relieved that I found her that I was not upset. But boy, was I like, oh my God, I can't. That feeling where you think you just... Talk about losing your kid is one of the bigger things on the list of failures.
Oh, goodness. Yes.
But thank goodness I found her. She was okay. And then we could go home. I could go home again.
Yes.
And then the funny thing was you called me.
I sure
and I
did.
did not answer because I was like, I cannot talk to her again until I have her child.
Yes. And then you got off the elevator and I heard somebody say, oh, I'm so glad you found her. And I said, what? Find who? Uh-huh.
No, that was...
So, yes. So you have had that moment.
Yeah, but boy, it was those days where I remember with the kids crying and I'm exhausted and I'm waking up in the middle of the night and then you're trying to change a diaper and they pee all over the bed. You're like, it was only 2 seconds without a diaper. How did they time the pee right then? And then I'm like getting annoyed and angry and I'm irritated with the baby, even though it's not their fault. And I'm irritated with myself. And it's just, I go to irritation.
Right.
I don't go to crying, but I think it's the same continuum, right?
Absolutely. And I think just like you said, for moms, for dads, for child carers, it will range. I know that I have a very visceral memory of Kylie at 6 months, and she was struggling one night, and I got up and we went into another room, and I remember I was so tired. And the only thing that I could do was put my head on the mattress and start to cry. And I remember little 6-month-old Kylie putting her head down right next to mine, really feeling that emotion, but just resonating with this mom hiding in her pantry around, just feeling so overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And then on the other end of that, more recently, when my children have more capabilities and more capacity to help, feeling resentment and irritation when I have to do it all or when I feel like I have to do it all and they're not contributing. So there's that whole continuum piece. And I really feel blessed in those moments and appreciative that we have taken that collaborative approach where I can come to them and share where I'm at, to really help protect my needs and my resourcing. And when I say resourcing, that's like my battery, to protect my battery from getting completely empty. And they can hear it. And they're familiar with the language and they're familiar with and trust the intent to come at it from a collaborative approach where I'm not just going to suddenly be demanding things of them And they're more willing to contribute and come to the table in a way that helps protect my resourcing.
Yeah. And it's really helpful actually to bring them into that space and not be there alone. Part of the loneliness and the hopelessness and the suffering is when you're in that space alone. Mm-hmm. And kids can come in there with you. We ask for heart hugs, so they're not trying to fix it and they know what to do. But the heart hug, episode 1, is around just being there with me. Give me empathy. Give my heart a hug. And I'm going to share with you what I'm feeling right now, which is I'm just so tired and overwhelmed, and things aren't working well at work right now. And I'm having some problems with some friends, and I'm worried about this issue over here, and I'm not sure what to do over there. And then just saying, hey, can you tell me back what you're hearing is weighing me down? And they'll tell me back. And then I'll say, if you had to imagine how I was feeling, what would you imagine those feelings to be? And they might say really tired or sad or worried. And I'll be like, that just feels wonderful, just being there with me. So to me, it's about bringing in connection from anybody around that space versus trying to get out of the space yourself or hide that being in that space from other people.
Or expect that you need to live in that space by yourself. I love that. Inviting other people to share that space with you, not having to hold it alone, not having to do all those things alone. I think that's huge. And I think you shared something and about sharing it with the kids. I know that before I had kids, or before, even in moments with our kids when they were younger, and I put that burden on myself to show up and be that super mom and do everything for them, and was that notion that I can't burden my kids with what's going on with me. I'm the parent. I'm supposed to have it all together. The detriment of that is, 1, you don't invite them in. 2, they feel your tension, your upset, your frustration. It was so evident to me when Kylie put her head down. She wasn't even verbal, but she could tell I was in pain at 6 months old. And so it doesn't go unnoticed. And when you invite them in, a lot of times you think, oh, that's going to feel unstable or unsafe for my children. Tell them I'm having problems at work, or I'm having problems with friends. But I think it makes you human.
And it makes it okay to have problems.
Yeah.
Kids don't tell you their problems if you don't act like problems are normal to have. And
right.
If you never share, now you don't have to get into the specifics if you think that's overwhelming or you're not comfortable. But if I have a problem with someone at work and I'll say, the way we're thinking about this project is different, and we're in a disagreement right now, and I'm having a hard time getting to some collaborative place with them. They have the same problem with their friends at school.
Right.
So you can use language that resonates with them. But I think that if you can model it and show them that it's okay and here's how you do it, goes a long way.
I love that. And I think it absolutely does go a long way. Shall we move on to Cheers and Tears?
We shall.
This episode of Webe Parents is brought to you by Webe Calm, the child calmer designed by doctors and loved by parents. Struggling with bedtime routines or managing your child's anxiety? Webe Calm transforms deep breathing into a fun and engaging activity, helping kids find their inner calm. Perfect for bedtime stressful moments or any time your child needs a little extra help to stay calm. Visit webecalm.com to learn more and bring tranquility to your family. Webe Calm, because we be in this together.
Cheers and tears.
So in Cheers and Tears, we take a moment to celebrate our successes and acknowledge our struggles. We share things that went really well and things that didn't quite go as planned. And it's really all about learning and growing together. The story that I'm going to share today was a tear that became a cheer. Kylie, our daughter who is 12, and Jordan, our daughter who is 10, were at camp last week, and they were getting ready for a field trip the following day. And Jordan was super excited, as she'd already planned out the two friends that she was going to sit next to and what they were all going to wear. They're going to be triplets. And so she was uber excited, ready for the next day. Kylie, who didn't quite find as many friends at this camp, as a lot of the kids were younger than her, was not looking forward to the field trip at all. And instead, she was feeling a tremendous amount of anxiety, thinking that no one was going to want to sit next to her and she was going to be sitting alone on the bus. So she immediately went to the assumption that no one would want to be with her and that being alone just felt so awful she actually wanted to stay home and not go on the field trip. They take different approaches. Jordan is the assumer of everybody likes me until they tell me directly that they don't. And Kylie goes into that space of nobody likes me until they directly tell me that they do. And so this was really an opportunity to share with Kylie that the stories that we tell ourselves greatly impact how we show up and then what manifests for us. So if Kylie gets on that bus with the attitude of nobody's going to want to sit next to me and I'm going to sit alone, she's got tension in her face, tension in her body, and the result is, yeah, probably no one's going to want to sit next to her. But not because they don't like Kylie, because she's looking upset or frustrated or angry, and they don't want to be in that environment or energetic space. So they're going to go find a friend who is friendlier, for lack of a better word.
So how you think about the world, how you perceive the world affects how you show up in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when Kylie assumes that nobody's going to want to be her friend, she also doesn't try. So she doesn't make an effort. A lot of times that can be seen as aloof, or she's the other judgments that come of that, or she wants to be alone, or she chooses to be in solitude, or she thinks she's too good for us, or she's mean, or whatever that is. Versus Kylie making an effort, her fear of rejection prevents her from even making that effort in the first place.
Which then creates this tender need around acceptance, which I can relate to, where if you're worried because of stories from past experiences that people aren't going to respond favorably, people aren't going to want to include you, you're going to experience rejection, whatever that is, that can then lead you to not trying, which then continues to get in the way of acceptance, because you can't meet your need for acceptance if you don't even put yourself out there, or you put yourself out there with this aggressive or defensive posture that other people react to, and it's not even personal, it's just that. So
right, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
And then you have this situation and you are alone, and then the story embeds itself. Oh, I was right. Nobody wants to be my friend. And then that's how you show up to the next situation, and so on and so forth. And it just spirals downward. And so we had the opportunity to talk about that and to give Kylie some time to think about, oh, maybe I can approach this situation differently. And sure enough, she went the next day and she went with the attitude of, I am going to find somebody to sit next to and make a friend. And she did. She made a friend.
How did she respond to that? How did she debrief afterwards?
After the field trip?
Yeah, after she showed herself that this was different than the story and how that felt. That sort of debrief mining for connection from there.
She was in a real celebration of what happened. And also it gave her the opportunity to see that when we put ourselves out there, maybe she won't always get that response, but she put herself out there and it's possible. Versus if you're not going to put yourself out there, it's not going to be possible.
So you seal your fate if you don't put yourself out there, and if you do, it could be a totally new experience you don't even know. So
the other important piece here is that it may not always turn out the way that you hope. If you put yourself out there, you might meet rejection and you might get hurt. And there's an opportunity to mourn that experience without it impacting how you see yourself in the world. Does that make sense?
So make it situational versus about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. It's like a static versus dynamic. Static, it's just you, and there's nothing you can do about that. Dynamic is, hey, every situation is different. This time I happen to not have someone to sit next to. The next 4 times I might.
Right.
I like it. So let's jump into the topic and tools section where we address key parenting issues, examine the significance and challenges it presents, and then equip you with a practical tool to address this in your everyday life. And I am very excited about today's tool called Hearing Bossy.
What does that mean, hearing bossy?
Well, it came out of the concept around the submission rebellion versus collaboration paradigm. Submission meaning you give in, rebel, you fight the power, versus collaboration, we're all trying to work together. And that's the power with versus power under or power over. Power over is I have power over you. Power under is I put myself under you where I'm the victim and you're stronger. Power with is where we work together. And the whole idea of the tool Hearing Bossy is if I hear something where I am experiencing it as power over or I'm putting myself in that power under place, I want to bring that out. And I want to give my children the opportunity and the power to bring that up. And then I have the option to do it differently. I may not do it differently. In that moment, I may be okay with power over or demand energy. But I'd like to have that be a last resort, not a first resort in my parenting toolbox. The idea with this tool is that it helps us know when we're in that power dynamic where the kids are actually helping us do that. Because sometimes we don't realize that the kids are submitting and that they are in that place of hearing demand. So it's eroding connection and trust and our goodwill in our relationship. And I don't even know it's happening. So the idea for this tool came up when I said, hey, I want them to help me. I want to know when this is happening.
And you want to know in the moment. So hearing bossy is an opportunity to share that in the moment that it's happening. And I love that. And just to give a little bit of background, that whole notion of submission and rebellion, the reality is that is what's happening without a collaborative approach. That is what's happening when kids respond to what they perceive as a demand, as something that they absolutely have to do. They're either going to, in order to preserve artificial harmony or to not get punished or out of fear or out of the fear of even being abandoned or desire to want to be loved, are going to submit to that, not say anything and just do it.
And there's a high cost to that.
Absolutely.
And that's the whole point of this tool.
But the other side of that, before we get into that, is the rebellion, is the kids who say, I don't need your approval. I don't need your love. I'm going to rebel against you. A lot of times that's the transition that we see when children become teenagers. It's not overnight, all of a sudden they found their mouth. It's that they've been submitting and submitting and submitting. And you talked about the cost. Maybe you can get into that more. And now that they feel a little bit more powerful, a little bit stronger, a little bit more able to take care of themselves, they start rebelling.
And that dynamic, the quicker we can identify it and try to heal it, I believe the better the connection, the better the relationship. And having kids help us identify when they hear demands but are losing touch with their autonomy is essential to maintaining trust and goodwill. So anytime the kids, or actually any of us for that matter, are acting from a place of hearing a demand, everybody pays for it later. And the cost is much higher than you realize. If parents realize the cost of a child doing something because they are worried about getting punished, or they're worried about being unlovable, or they are worried about some consequence that's going to cause pain in their lives, and that's the energy from which they're doing something, it is so costly. And I'm not saying they can't do it from that energy. But like I said, we want that to be a last resort. And even if you can't think of another way to proceed to get your needs met other than through a demand, other than power over in that moment, it still builds so much goodwill and trust to name that with the child, saying that I can't think of a collaborative way to proceed right now, so I'm making a demand. Because a lot of parents will say things like, I said, please go brush your teeth right now. And they think if they put the please in there, it's a request. Or, hey, I said it nicely, whatever that means. But you're making a demand for your kids to brush their teeth. And if you just said, hey, right now I can't handle you not brushing your teeth. I can't think of another way to get those teeth brushed right now. So I am making a demand for you to brush your teeth, and I am not willing to hear a no. That builds so much trust, especially when you have this whole paradigm created with the hearing bossy and this is a last resort. So I've done that with the kids where I'll say, hey, sometimes I'm making a demand and it's just in that moment. Sometimes I'm just so exhausted that I can't even collaborate right now. I let myself get to the end of my rope and I just really need you to comply and go along with this. So I'm making a demand. And even then I might check in and say, hey, do I have to? Sometimes it's the protective use of force. Sometimes I'm grabbing my daughter's hand and I'm walking and we're avoiding something that's dangerous. I don't have time to talk about it and I don't have any space to hear a no. And then afterwards we might debrief.
You might get a gift, something that we talked about in a previous episode.
So I'm not saying to parents they can't use authoritarian parenting style, but this collaborative approach is much more fun and effective and less costly in the long run. So save the authoritarian for the end.
When you absolutely can't think of another way.
Right. Or like me the other day when I was not connected to my skills and triggered with something that Kylie did. And I raised my voice and I was like, hey, if this happens, I'll do authoritarian. I'll tell you exactly what to do. And I'm going to win. And I'm going to be and I was just going on and on for a minute there because underneath that I was afraid and feeling embarrassed. But my point was that I'm talking out loud and I'm like, hey, we'll go authoritarian. I was threatening authoritarian parenting style. Is that in the skill book? Is that something
that would be a no skill.
That would be a no skill.
Well, it's not that it's a no skill. It's where does it fit in? I think it's not about never taking an authoritarian approach, like you said, but the idea is the intent is whenever we can to have that collaborative approach. So we share that with the girls. Hey, our desire is to always do this as a team. We want to do this together. But if you're not willing to do it together, then if it's not our way, it's going to be my way. And just to keep that in perspective there, probably didn't need the rant and rave, but share.
That's the flair, the special sauce.
Yes, the drama. But to share with the kids, if we're going to be doing this together, you need to come to the table too.
And they are much more excited to come to the table when they trust that there's a collaborative effort first and foremost. And this hearing bossy is what allows us to redo it. So the tool is simple, and it's basically asking your child to tell you every time they hear bossy from you so that you can rephrase what you're wanting, maybe translate it into feelings and needs versus telling them what they have to do at first. But the hearing bossy is the key. So I said, Kylie and Jordan, every time you hear bossy, and that's me telling you what you have to do or you don't think you have choice, you lose your autonomy, I want you to pause and say, Dad, I'm hearing bossy. And then I'm going to rephrase it, ideally from feelings and needs and sharing what's going on.
And the importance of that is it's not to make requests of your children, but you want them to contribute. You want them to connect to the reason why they're contributing. And for that to be something that is actually aligned with their own values. That's how they learn the importance of contribution. And that's how they grow more willing to do that. And that's really the energy that you want them to come into contribution, is from a place of willingness versus obligation versus submission or rebellion.
And hearing bossy lets me know that we're disconnected.
That you just made a demand.
But that they're not connected to my feelings and needs, because I trust that if they really connected to my feelings and needs and I connected to theirs, we're going to find a way to move forward. Now, sometimes they're hearing bossy because I'm not connected to my skills. Sometimes I'm under-resourced where I'm just tired, hungry.
And sometimes you're not being heard, I imagine, or feeling like you matter, like there are needs that are going unmet.
Right. So that's where I'm triggered. And I go into a sort of defensive threat state because when I think my needs aren't going to be met, just like anybody else, that can trigger threat and reactivity. And that's really what reactivity is, where there's a sense of threat and danger to your needs not being met. So telling them to do this is one thing. getting them to do it is another, because they're going to be scared. Usually when they're hearing Bossy, I'm talking in a way that has tension, tone, intensity, anger. So I got to get them to be excited to try this, because it's really not just for them. It's to help me parent from an energy that I value more, a connected energy. So what I did was I told them, I said, every time you say hearing Bossy, if I get defensive or I attack back or I snap or anything like that, other than say, thank you for telling me that, and then I get to check in with what I want to do next, I said, I'll give you $5. Because they're nervous. Because at first I tried to do it, and then they would hear Bossy, but they wouldn't say anything. And I said, why didn't you say anything? And they said, Dad, we were nervous. I said, well, what would get you to try it? And they said, $5. They said they're nervous and I'm going to get defensive. Mm-hmm. I said, okay, let's do $5 then. So then they were very excited, and it helps me respond the way I'd like to, because I don't want to pay them $5.
There you go. But you made a very important point there, which is the only reaction that you have agreed to is to acknowledge and to thank them for sharing that with you. It's not you suddenly do it differently. It's not you apologize, or there's no pressure at that moment to do it any differently. And I think that's important. It's just acknowledging like, oh, okay, I'm coming at this with a demand energy.
Right, you're coming in hot.
Yeah.
And it just helps pause. And I think the way we gamified it just starts to disarm, because at the end, the goal of everything we're doing is connection.
Yes, because if anybody knows, Matt does not want to pay that $5.
Are you calling me cheap?
No, I'm calling, you have an intention to grow.
There we go. It's important to note what Alona said, where you are not promising to do anything differently. And you may proceed with the demand to avoid being permissive until you refine the sort of the collaborative, non-permissive approach. But at least you're acknowledging that with your kids. You're saying, hey, I'm trying to learn this collaborative, non-permissive approach and shift from making demands over to that. But sometimes I'm not going to be able to do it in the moment, and I might still be making demands. But I'd love for you to acknowledge it, and then that'll give me a second to try and translate it. So when I say to the kids, you have to go clean your room right now, and they'll say, Dad, I'm hearing Bossy, and I'll say, thank you. And then I'll bite my tongue, and then I'll say, okay, well, what am I feeling? I'm feeling a little bit out of sorts. I'm feeling a little frustrated, a little unsettled, and I really want some order in the house. I'd like some help, some care, and I would love for this room to be cleaned. And right now, does it feel so intense that I need you to do it right now, meaning I am going to make a demand, or can we collaborate and figure this out? And I'm checking in inside. The hearing Bossy, it makes that space.
And if you choose to collaborate with them, it's, again, sharing that notion of we can collaborate if we're all coming to the table. If you're sharing your needs, you're making the request, and there is no desire to collaborate with you, the other side of that could be a lot more demands.
Exactly. And it's tough when everybody's triggered.
Yeah.
I've had that where our daughters would get almost a little sassy, and I'd be like, you need to stop what you're doing right now. And they'll be like, I'm hearing Bossy, Dad. And I'm like, I want to kill her. And it's like this intensity, but we're both doing the best we can, even if it's not always pretty. So maybe we can show the no skills to pro skills.
No skills to pro skills.
And use the example of the towel from Hurricane Harbor, with the kids getting the towel. And we would say, go get.
I remember that story.
So no skills to pro skills is.
Yeah, it highlights key aspects of addressing issues with and then without connection skills.
And showing the difference.
Right,
when you
showing
don't
the
have them.
difference. So what could no skills look like in a situation where they're going to be hearing Bossy? The other day we were going to Hurricane Harbor, and I was getting a whole ton of stuff ready, all the food and the water and snacks, and I asked the girls to help me run upstairs and grab some towels. And my beautiful Kylie looked at me and said, I'm hearing a demand. And I just felt so indignant. How can I be doing all of this stuff and she's not even willing to help me? She's hearing a demand because I asked her to go upstairs and get some towels. And to your point, you were talking about that before. That was me not getting needs met, pushing myself. That goes back to the beginning of this episode, pushing myself to be everything for these children. And then they're not even willing to contribute even a little bit. Well, that definitely set me off. And so I did not take that pause. Instead, I said, if you want to go to Hurricane Harbor, you better get those towels. That was a definite no skill moment. And yes, she got the towels, but boy, was she not happy about it. And the cost was, we both got into the car going to this awesome water park that we're supposed to be having play and fun. And both of us are pissy and mad at each other and not wanting to be in this car together. So there was a really big cost. And yes, there was a repair and we got to a good place. But had I tried that with skill, it could have spared that significant cost and the time that it takes to then repair that break in our connection. And so there were a lot of opportunities for pro skills, beginning with all the shoulds that I was putting in my head around what I should be doing and how I should be showing up, to the point where I got my battery so low that I shot it out as a demand.
It really was a demand because you let your battery get so
low.
Low.
Right, because I let my battery get so low. And at that point, I felt like, and that's how I started. I said, girls, I'm really needing some help here. So you can imagine how triggered I was when I heard, that's a demand. But yeah, one, I let my battery get so low. I was so under-resourced that the only thing I had left was a demand. And like you said, it came out as a polite, like, I'm really needing some help here. Get upstairs and get the towels, right? But they heard.
That's what we call a demand dressed in request clothing.
Yes, that is exactly what it was. And the opportunity to do that with pro skills was to actually see the gift in Kylie's feedback, which is, it's not that she's not willing to do it, but she doesn't want to do it because it's a demand. She wants to contribute in willingness to help me, not because I'm forcing her to do it in order to get to Hurricane Harbor.
And caring about her needs. She was right in the middle of something, it sounded like.
Yes, she was.
And so she wants to be able to contribute to you, but also have care for what she's doing.
Right.
And if there's a demand, you're basically saying, I don't care what you're doing. Only thing that matters is my needs. So she's stuck there because she's like, well, I do want to support mom. I do want to care for her. But I also want to care for myself. And if the only way to care for my mom is to not care for me right now, that doesn't feel very good. So all of that is what's behind, Mom, I'm hearing bossy, or Mom, I'm hearing a demand. And imagine if we don't make a space for them to bring that up, they're learning over and over again to suppress their needs to keep other people happy. And that has a whole cost to it. And that brings us back to what I was saying, which is the cost.
And or fight you on it. And that's where you're fighting back and forth with your kids on a regular basis.
Right, because then they're fighting, hey, we got to get my needs met here, not your needs. And there's this idea of it's binary. Either I'm going to meet my needs or I'm going to meet yours, but we can't do both. And the whole concept of collaborative, non-permissive parenting is we can do both.
Right. And so the pro skills approach to that would have been to say, hey, I'm needing some help here. Would you guys be willing to get the towels before we leave? There was no reason that they had to get it at that moment when I made the demand. And for Kylie, that would have shown care. Maybe I couldn't even taken it a step further and say, I see you're in the middle of something. Would you be willing to help me out by getting some towels when you're done? Acknowledge that she's in something, to share that I'm really needing some help and support, and then to see if they're willing to do that by getting the towels.
And sometimes there is a need for it to get done now, just to make sure we're acknowledging all your needs, which is trust that it's going to get done. You're trying to keep so many things together that if they forget it, that's one more challenge mom puts on herself to deal with. So one option could also be, hey, if you get it now, I'm going to be able to check it off the list. If you don't get it now and you forget, I just need you to know that you're going to be okay without a towel.
Right. Lots of different ways that you can approach that.
So I just want to make sure we're honoring the urgency you felt, too, to get it done now. It also was to meet a need as well. It's not that it was unreasonable or out of left field. There were needs being met there, too, I think.
I definitely, absolutely agree with that. However, I also think you mentioned that with the cleaning the room. Now I'm thinking about the towels. And maybe it's an opportunity for me to reflect, but my guess is that many of the demands that we make on kids don't need to take place right at that moment.
Agreed.
And that in giving time and space for a more collaborative opportunity or approach or discussion, they will get done, and the energy around how they get done will be so much more positively impactful and connecting.
Yeah. It's not just what you want to get done, but what do you want the energy to be in the house and between you when it gets done.
Right. So in that vein, how do we bring this home?
Bringing it home.
How do we help parents know how to introduce this and practice it in their own family?
The ways we like to do this is first explain it in words that they can understand. So when we explain what does hearing bossy mean and demands, and when you have to do something and you don't think you have a choice, and we really want you to raise everybody's awareness whenever you hear this, because you're going to help me, because I don't want to make demands. And especially, I'd love to be collaborative and not make demands as much as possible. But when I do make demands, I want to call them out as demands so we don't erode trust. So you explain that in words they can understand. You invite them to collaborate. So, hey, does anybody here interested in playing this game we're calling Hearing Bossy? And anytime you're hearing bossy, you let me know. And if I have any reaction other than thank you, and I get to reflect on how I want to proceed, then we can gamify something that is exciting for everybody if that happens. And then modeling it. So sometimes I'll do that with Alona. I'll be like, oh, I'm hearing bossy. And sometimes she'll do that with me. We'll do it with the kids. Sometimes the kids will say it to us and I'll joke. Sometimes I'll be bossy on purpose. That's part of the practicing it for the fire drill, where we say, I'm going to come up and try and boss them around and see. And if they don't, I'll say, hey, didn't you hear bossy there? Oh, yeah, I forgot that. I'm like, remember, you got to tell me it's important that we're doing that. You're really helping me out. And I think that's important, too, to let them know that you're helping me out and encouraging them. That's another one. Encourage it. Hey, here's how you can help me. This is why it's so important. It really makes me and our relationship stronger when we do this, because nobody wants to do things where they don't think they have choice or they're worried about some consequence if they don't do it. And ultimately, it doesn't mean needs for care for them if I'm forcing them to do what I want and it doesn't also work for them. Again, I'd like that to be a last resort. And then finally, celebrate it. Whenever they say hearing bossy, I'm like, good job, thank you, high five. I love that you're telling me this, and here's why I love it. And I explain to them how it helps me. It's helping me show up differently. It's helping our relationship. We're building more trust, all sorts of wonderful things. So they get so excited by all of that, and there's so many different fun ways to bring it into the family.
Yeah, I love that. So before we go, we like to leave with one last thought.
Just one last thing.
A key takeaway or an inspirational message to carry with you. And today's one last thing is, don't just focus on what you want your child to do. Think more about why you want them to choose to do it. Ultimately, we want our children to connect to their internal values around contribution and care and mutuality and respect, not to do things because they're fearing our response or our reaction to it.
I love it. We'd love to hear from you. So please email us at parents@webetogether.com with your own cheers and tears, as well as any questions or stories you'd like to share. Your experiences and feedback are invaluable to us. Thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to connecting with you next time. And before you leave, we hope you're enjoying our podcast, and we'd love to hear from you about what you like and what you want to hear more of. So If willing, please take a moment to give us a rating and a review. That not only helps us improve, but also helps other parents find us. The more ratings we receive, the more people will hear about this podcast. Thank you for your support and for being part of our community.
Thank you. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Webe Parents podcast. To hear what else Doctors Matt and Alona are up to, visit us at webeparents.com. Remember to try something you learned today. It just might be the first step in a new relationship with your kid.
Stay tuned for our upcoming episode of Webe Parents, where Dr. Alona Pulde and Dr. Matthew Lederman share heartfelt stories and practical parenting tools. Hear Matt's chaotic morning turned heartwarming lesson on letting go and receiving support from unexpected places. We'll dive into headlines and heartlines, explore the power of empathy, and introduce a new tool called The Gift, making it exciting to express and hear about unmet needs. Join us for insights, laughs, and real-life parenting moments that connect and inspire. Don't miss it.